back into the Mark Cox Show. Congratulations to Jeff from Pacific, who was the winner of our last set of Monster Jam tickets for the week. But you can still go to the website and win there at 971talk.com. So be sure and check that out. How about that? So one of the stories that we discussed here yesterday, because it was sort of breaking news as we went on the air yesterday, the City of St. Louis Ways and Means Committee voted against giving $60 million in public support for a Major League Soccer stadium. And then, as often happens in city government, they went and huddled in a back office, and they came back out a few minutes later, and lo and behold, they voted in favor of some amended version of it. I think it was 6-2 was the final vote. They even got the aldermanic president to come in and vote on it to give them the vote they needed to win. And I've argued against this from the beginning, and I know we've checked in with our folks at our friends at the Show Me Institute. Graham Renz is joining us today from Show Me Institute. You wrote a piece on this just today, you mentioned, right?
Yes, that's right.
So what do you know about the details of what came out of Ways and Means yesterday?
Yeah, so just before those details, something that we've driven home a lot before is that the economic research on this topic about publicly funding stadiums it's just unanimous. Economists don't agree on much. They agree on stadium financing, and it's that we're not going to get the returns that are promised to us. We always see rosy projections, profits for businesses and the city itself. They nearly never pan out. So that's just one thing to be cautious about this. But there was a bill that was introduced. For some reason, it abated a whole bunch of taxes that the city would have collected. And when asked why this provision was in there, no city official knew. It took a developer, a private real estate developer, to say, hey, yeah, these things are being abated for these other reasons. Literally no one in the city government knew why all of a sudden this 5% tax was going to be given back to these developers and not going to the city.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And somebody, one of the aldermen caught it, asked the question, and it was removed, and then they all voted in favor.
So what happened was that there was going to be this amusement tax that should have been levied that wasn't going to be levied.
Okay.
So that's a 5% tax that's not going there. And then there was going to be extra tax increment financing revenue that would go to Paul McKee, who's a developer in the area. He's the one behind the Northside Regeneration. And nobody knew why those were in there. So an amended bill came back. They met for an hour behind closed doors. We come back, and only half of the amusement tax will be abated, and a good chunk of that tax increment financing money is going to go to the city, but a big chunk, $5 million, is still going to Paul McKee's development. And that passed out of committee. So this bill will be heard by the Board of Aldermen, the entire board, and then depending where it goes from there, it might go to voters or not.
So compared to the original, a slightly better agreement, but it still doesn't reach the threshold of being a good agreement in terms of a return on taxpayer dollars. Absolutely.
It does not. It still doesn't look good. We're still chipping in $60 million, and that's just the city. As this group was trying to bring the team here, they're still trying to get money from the state. So you put in $60 million, you get out $17 million is what they're projecting from these amendments. That's not a good return. Some folks say that overall the city's going to profit on this. They didn't provide any numbers to justify that claim. But still, a $17 million profit on a $60 million investment over 30 years. I mean, come on, that's a terrible investment.
It is.
Especially when we're gambling with taxpayer dollars.
Right. Yeah, they seem to lose the concern over that a little bit. Also, yesterday, they also voted to put to a vote a tax increase that would help, I guess, start to build funds for a Metrolink extension.
That's right. The funds that would be raised to fund the stadium are only going to kick in if a different sales tax increase is approved, and that would be for 0.5% on all sales in the city to fund just a segment of the really expensive multi-billion-dollar Metrolink expansion that's been pushed for a while now. See,
I almost think that the people that push public transportation like that know that there's no return on that dollar. It doesn't. They have to subsidize it even. Metrolink subsidized, right, on metro buses?
Absolutely.
To a huge extent. So there's no. The stadium is not going to pay for itself, really, correct?
Nope.
So there's not a whole lot of difference between the two, except one of them is pitched as creating economic development, and even then the study showed that that's not really the case. So when it comes to these economic development subsidies, another example you brought in today was the Del Mar Loop and the new trolley that's being put in over there, I'm guessing?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So most of us have been to the Del Mar Loop. We know it is one of the most vibrant areas in the region, lots of businesses, lots of people. You think it wouldn't be a part of the region that needs to be handed out tax subsidies. It doesn't need to be declared blighted. But you'd be wrong. Policymakers have declared property on one of the busiest intersections in the loop at the intersection of Del Mar and Skinker. There's a property there that's been declared blighted, and they're giving the developers nearly $4.5 million to build their development there.
Sounds like the West County Mall debacle a few years ago. Do you remember that?
I don't know the specifics, but yeah. And
they went into De Pere and declared the mall blighted. In the middle of De Pere.
Yeah.
So come on.
Unfortunately, these things aren't uncommon. We've got an example of a luxury tower being put in the Central West End. It got $10 million. There was last year the development that has a Whole Foods in the Central West End. That got $6 million. What we've created by giving these subsidies out for so long, for decades now, we've handed out nearly $1 billion in taxpayer dollars. We've essentially got developers hooked on these things, right? Perhaps in the past, they really needed it to help their bottom line to make a project financially feasible. Now these folks know that these subsidies are given out like candy. They know somebody's going to cave in. They know a city council isn't going to tell them no and drive the business out. So they say, hey, I've got this project. It looks really good. It'd boost your revenue. But man, I really need a subsidy. I may need it. I may not need it. I could show you some numbers on a spreadsheet that tell you that I need it. But if somebody in the Central West End for a luxury tower needs a subsidy, I think we can all agree that our policies have gone awry. And just one more thing, the city conducted a real comprehensive study on these subsidies to see if these things are working or not.
Right.
And I just want to quote from the executive summary some of the findings. And this is a study that was conducted by a city agency on that agency's practices. And I quote, while there may be some disagreement about the value of some of these incentive packages, it is clear that the city gains no net benefit from an extremely costly program with no economic development impact. That's not me. That's not some policy experts or someone who you might worry about being biased. That's the city itself. Yet we spent over the past 16 years nearly $1 billion on these things.
It's maddening.
It doesn't work.
And the thing about it now, we just have to be honest about it, is that if one city stands up and says, no, I'm not doing this anymore, there's somebody right next door who's waving the green at them, luring them across the city border. Right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. What happens at these subsidies they're at least justified as a way to grow businesses. What really happens, we're just moving business around. Mm-hmm. And when you're a city council member somewhere in the county, if you don't hand one of these things out, somebody else is going to. So you feel that pressure. But what that leads to is just it's a race to the bottom. For one, the region as a whole loses, and two, you do this for long enough and you hollow out your tax base, and sooner or later, 10, 15 years go by and you don't have enough money to fix your sewers, to fix the water, to fund public schools. We see it in Kansas City.
And Graham, I'm wondering if there's not a fix for that in Jeff City. Won't the fix for this have to come from Jeff City? It's not going to come from the local municipalities.
I think that's probably the way to do it, because individual municipalities, they don't have the incentive. They don't have the incentive to stop giving these things out. They don't. They only have to lose if they say no.
I'm going to have to get Senator Andrew Koenig on here, one of the newly elected senators down there who's been writing this TIF issue for a while, and ask him if there's going to be any kind of reform from state legislature on this, because I think it's past due. I'm sure it's something he's working on probably already.
I think it's going to probably have to come from the state, and I think again the research is clear. These things don't work, but they're extraordinarily expensive. We get citizens, taxpayers, ordinary folks get less and less in public services. and the economy is not doing any better.
Graham Renz, excellent job as usual from our friends at the Show Me Institute. Go to showmeinstitute.org and check out all their great research over there. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Have a great weekend. We appreciate you. All right, 314-969-9797. We will get to some of your phone calls coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll talk more about the president's comments at that news conference today that he made with the British Prime Minister. Haven't had a chance to play a lot of those, but I want you to hear them. We'll be right back.